Can you tell me your name and what you do?
I'm Neil Hopkins. I'm the principal of Peter Symonds College in Winchester. We have links with the Falkland Islands. We effectively provide the sixth form education for Falkland Islands students because they don't have a big enough population for their own sixth form. And I was really honoured to be invited down by the Falkland Islands government as their guest to go to their Liberation Day anniversary, 30th anniversary celebrations last week. It's a long way, but it was a very fantastic trip.
So before you tell us what you were actually doing there and the reasons for going, you've told us a bit about the students. Can you tell me what the flight was like? How did you get there?
Yeah, you fly from RAF Brize Norton, but on an ordinary commercial plane. I mean, civilians can buy tickets on it. It's an 18-hour journey with about an hour and a half stopover at Ascension Island. It's not a comfortable journey. You go overnight and arrive sort of midday or the early afternoon, and you come back the opposite journey, obviously. We were treated as VIPs, though. I have to say it was very flattering. I was part of a party, about 16 people, with a strange mixture till you realise that the small countries sort of huddled together. There was a mixture of people from a minister from Gibraltar, there was someone from the Welsh Assembly, from the Scottish Parliaments, there was the shadow foreign minister from the Labour Party, and almost in our party, but sort of partly separate, was the Foreign and Commonwealth Minister Jeremy Brown and his various aides. We flew down together. We had a slightly different schedule to us when we were down there. The packing, frankly, is a nightmare because, of course, it's winter in the Falkland Islands, strong winds all the time. Ascension Island is in the tropics, near the equator, and we had to look. So we had to go from the summer to the winter, knowing that when we got off the plane, before we'd even got to the hotel, we'd be going to a memorial wreath-laying ceremony at Fitzroy, and by the way, had to look smart. It was a challenge.
And when you got to the islands, what was the attitude of the Falkland Islanders?
Well, I mean, the college, weirdly, 8,000 miles away, is very well known. So I only have to say to someone, hello, I'm Peter Symonds from Peter Symonds. I'm not Peter Symonds, I'm Neil Hopkins from Peter Symonds. And they immediately say, oh, hello, and my sister went there, or whatever. The attitude of the Falkland Islanders in general is they're still incredibly grateful for what was done for them 30 years ago. And there's a real respect and desire to sort of keep marking those events. There were several ex-paratroopers down there at the same time of us, and some very moving ceremonies. But I think the positive thing about the islands is, that all those sacrifices that were made would have been a waste if they'd just been, frozen in time. What's happened is the islands have moved on, they've built on that, and they're very grateful for the opportunity to develop a society that those poor soldiers and airmen and so forth gave their lives for them to make that possible.
So when you were there, what was your accommodation like? And did you also mix with the VIPs a lot?
Yeah, we were VIPs. What do you mean mix with them? we were part of this group of 16 who were moved around the island. There's a hotel. Stanley is a small town, a village-sized place, but of course it's the only significant town in the island, so it has everything disproportionate to its size. So we stay in a perfectly decent hotel, the Malvina House. You have to be careful to say Malvina, not Malvinas House Hotel, which is 2-3 star level hotel. It's got lots of pubs. It's got a cathedral. It's got a Roman Catholic church. It's got a couple of supermarkets, and yet it's tiny. And we were moved around the islands, from reception to meeting to wreath laying to visit. We were flown out as a real treat to an area called Volunteer Point in a helicopter to see the wildlife there, the king penguin colony, which was fantastic. And we also were flown out in these little 8-seater Islander aircraft to various other more far-flung settlements just to meet the people out there. People don't always appreciate, I think, in the UK, that the island's landmass, if you stuck it all together, is roughly the size of Wales, yet the population is just over 3,000, the vast majority of whom live in Stanley. So camp, as they call everything that's not Stanley itself, is just unbelievably big and empty. The landscape is very much like sort of Scottish moorland, rolling rather than mountainous, with very little in it. And one of the things that struck me talking to some of the people there is that, because the main business really out in the camp is sheep farming, for the wool, not the meat. It's how many acres per sheep, not how many sheep per acre.
You've touched on the similarities and some of the differences, and we often hear how British the Falkland Islands are. What would you say that makes it very different from the UK?
Well, it is very British. I mean, it feels, when you first walk about Stanley or whatever, as if you're in the landscape feels Scottish. and the people speak in a normal sort of English accent. There's not much accent noticeably, but then suddenly you see a bit of alien wildlife. I remember walking vividly along Ross Road, which is the main road on the sort of sea, the water side in Stanley, past one of the few trees, looking up and seeing several turkey vultures looking down at us. Now, I'll say that again, turkey vultures looking down at us. You don't get many of those in Scotland. So it is actually quite alien. It's surreal, actually, because it's like having a bit of Britain moved into a different landscape, but they're more British than we are some of the time. I mean, they really are incredibly, incredibly English, really, rather than incredibly British, and they really do feel part of Britain. I don't think I've seen so many Union Jacks in such a small space as I did on the Liberation Day itself, the 14th of June.
Two more questions. We've heard a lot about the Argentinian president and her views. Did you gauge any reaction in the Falkland Islands to Argentina's continuing claims?
I mean, obviously, it fills their lives a lot of the time. They vary, I think, between trying to sort of play it down as in it's not worth fussing about or it's just them again, through to obviously being very anxious about it and also trying to get the message across through the world's media that they are a genuine indigenous population. They've lived there, some of them in generations, seventh generation, from 1833. The Argentinian claim is a bit spurious if you start looking at the history. We haven't got long enough to go through it, but I mean, there's been a British presence in the Falkland Islands since before Argentina existed, and these people, have been there since 1833, as I say. So they've just, while we were down there, made an announcement they were going to have a referendum amongst the Falkland Island people to say, do you want to be British? Do you want to be independent? Do you want to be part of Argentina? They know full well it'll be a resounding, we want to stay part of Britain as an overseas territory, but they want to do it formally and officially with overseas observers, to make sure that this can be proven not to be fixed. Because the Argentinians still put out propaganda that this is an implanted artificial population.
One final question. What feelings and emotions do you take away from your visit?
So many, because it's so recent. I mean, it was a mixture of poignant moments. I can remember vividly being at Fitzroy, looking at the memorial to the Welsh Guards, and being part of a wreath-laying ceremony there in the freezing cold with a small group of veterans and a few odds and sods like me, overlooking a bay with just the noise of an oyster catcher going as it flew across its empty water, and thinking, this is the middle of nowhere and people died here. And yet, on the other hand, meeting this vibrant society and population and community that want to go forward from that.
One more question. Anything you'd like to add?
If you can afford it and you can spare the time and the journey, go and see the Falkland Islands. They're fantastic.